My inheritance was a single envelope. Inside was a name I was never meant to know. The room smelled like old wood, leather, and secrets. I sat stiffly in a high-backed chair that squeaked every time I shifted, surrounded by family members who didn't feel like family. We were all there for the reading of my father's will. Well, technically my stepfather. But he raised me, paid for my braces, taught me how to parallel park, and grounded me when I hacked into the school network in 10th grade. That counted for something. He wasn't warm. He wasn't cruel either. Just distant. A man of few words and fewer hugs. Mr. Dempsey, our family lawyer, an eternal suit-wearer, cleared his throat with the theatricality of someone who'd been waiting all day for this performance. To Margaret Carson he began. The house at 218 Ash Grove Lane, all contents within, and the joint savings account. Margaret, sitting upright in her navy blue funeral dress, nodded curtly. No emotion. Classic Margaret. The kind of woman who could make a soufflé and deliver a eulogy with the same level of enthusiasm. To Stephen Carson he continued. The vintage watch collection and 40% of the family shares. Stephen, my cousin, leaned back with a smirk that made me want to punch him. He hadn't even shown up to the funeral. Just the reading. To Lisa Carson, the painting collection, and on it went. Names, numbers, assets, the usual. I wasn't expecting much. I hadn't been close to him in years. Ever since college, there was this quiet, widening space between us. Phone calls grew rare. His silences grew longer. I chalked it up to aging, pride, or just plain male awkwardness. Mr. Dempsey looked up at me last. To Benjamin Carson. He paused. A silence fell over the room. Margaret tilted her head ever so slightly. My hands, folded in my lap, clenched tighter. Mr. Dempsey lifted a single white envelope from a slim file folder and handed it to me across the polished desk. A private letter. Per the deceased's instructions. That was it. No stocks. No antiques. No property. Just an envelope. Laughter bubbled up in Stephen's throat, barely concealed. Lisa gave me a sideways glance full of fake pity. I turned the envelope over. My name was handwritten in neat cursive. Inside, one thing. A single slip of paper. A name. Elena Waverly. That was all. No return address. No explanation. Just a name that felt like it had weight and history I didn't understand. I looked up. Who is this? Mr. Dempsey folded his hands. I was instructed not to answer any further questions unless you ask me directly. I'm asking directly. He hesitated. I'm afraid I'm not authorized to say more unless you return of your own volition, requesting further documentation. What does that mean? It means exactly what it sounds like. Margaret stood abruptly. Come on, Ben. This is ridiculous. No, wait. I looked at her. Do you know who this is? Her mouth opened, then closed again. I don't think this is the time. That's not a no. It's not a yes either, she snapped. Let it go, Ben. But I couldn't. There was something in the way her hands trembled slightly, the way her gaze avoided mine. My whole life, she'd been iron-willed. Nothing rattled her. But this? A name on a scrap of paper? That rattled her. Mr. Dempsey closed the folder. If there's nothing further. Margaret was already halfway to the door. I stayed seated, the envelope in my hands like it was about to burn through my skin. Elena Waverly. I didn't know who she was, but my father had made her the only thing I inherited, and I had a feeling that meant more than all the houses and paintings in the world. The guest room in Margaret's house still smelled like lemon polish and old books. She hadn't changed much since I moved out a decade ago. Same floral bedspread, same ticking wall clock, same faint hum of the neighbor's porch light buzzing through the window screen. Sleep didn't come easy. My mind kept circling back to that name. Elena Waverly. It was haunting me. A name with too much precision to be random, too sharp to be meaningless. I got up sometime around midnight and padded barefoot into the hallway. The house was dark, except for the low glow under Margaret's door. She was probably rereading some historical biography with her glasses sliding down her nose, or, more likely, pretending to be fine. In the corner cabinet at the end of the hall, She kept old photo albums, the kind with sticky plastic sheets and crumbling edges. I grabbed 2 at random and crept back to the bedroom. Flipping through the pages felt like excavating someone else's life. There I was, a chubby-cheeked toddler in corduroy overalls. My dad in his usual neutral expression, hand awkwardly resting on my shoulder. Margaret in pearls and polite smiles. Birthday parties. Summer barbecues. 100 moments that looked normal, but felt hollow now. Then, halfway through the second album, I stopped. It was a group photo from what looked like a conference or gala. Everyone in business attire, standing before a velvet curtain. 4 men. 1 woman. Her. The woman was tall, striking, with sharp cheekbones and a power stance that screamed confidence. A red scarf was knotted at her throat like armor. Below the photo, scrawled in fading blue ink, E. Waverly, Conference, 1992. My stomach tightened. It couldn't be a coincidence. I held the album like it might answer me back. I stared at her face, trying to find some resemblance. A curve of the jawline, a lift of the eyebrow, something, anything. I didn't hear Margaret come in until I felt her shadow cross the page. "I wondered if you'd go digging," she said softly. I didn't look up. "You knew her." She paused, arms folded across her robe. "I knew of her. That's not what this says." I tapped the caption. "She was around years ago. Your father worked with her briefly, just an old contact." I looked up then. Just a contact who made it into our family photo album? She was important once. Not anymore. That's a lie. Her expression didn't change, but her shoulders rose slightly. Tension, defensive. "Ben, listen to me. This is not something you need to unravel. It won't change anything. Let it go." "That's the second time you've said that," I said. "You never say let it go. You say, solve it, or be smart, or do your research." "Why this? Why now?" She looked tired, older than I remembered. "Because not all answers bring peace." I stared down at the photo again. "You're not telling me everything." "No," she admitted. "I'm not." With that, she turned and walked out of the room. I didn't follow her. Instead, I pulled out my laptop from my bag, flipped it open, and typed the name into the search bar. Elena Waverly. The first results were clinical. Forbes articles. Business profiles. Conference appearances. Founder and former CEO of Waverly Health International. Spearheaded privatized medical expansions across the West Coast. Accused twice of unethical mergers. Stepped down 3 years ago, under mysterious personal circumstances. Not married. No known children. No heirs. Estimated net worth, $86 million. I scrolled further. Paparazzi photos, a woman in dark sunglasses leaving a courthouse. A clipped interview where she declined to comment. Rumors of illness. Lawsuits. Whispers of a reclusive retreat to a private estate in Los Angeles. Then I found it. A photo from last year. Slightly blurred, but recent. Her hair was shorter now, silver streaked with black, but her face was unmistakable. Sharper, aged, but still powerful. She was alive. Still here. Still hiding something. I shut the laptop slowly and leaned back in the creaking chair. The house suddenly too quiet, like it was holding its breath with me. I didn't know who Elena Waverly really was. But now I was sure of one thing: she wasn't done with me. I didn't make an appointment. I didn't call ahead. I just showed up at Mr. Dempsey's law office at 9:03 a.m., still wearing yesterday's clothes and running on 4 hours of sleep and a gallon of caffeine-flavored regret. The receptionist gave me a wary look, but I think she saw something in my face that told her not to argue. Mr. Dempsey was mid-conversation with a younger associate when I walked in. "I need answers," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Now." He raised a brow, took off his glasses, and dismissed his colleague with a nod. The door clicked shut behind us. He gestured to the chair across from him, and for once, I didn't hesitate. "I take it," he said slowly, "that you've opened the envelope." I googled the name. I found her. Elena Waverly is alive, rich, and not exactly off the grid. So why was her name the only thing left to me? He watched me carefully, his fingers steepled. There is one more document, he said finally. It was left in my care under specific instructions. I was not to give it to you unless you came back of your own volition, which you have now done. He stood, walked to the filing cabinet in the corner, and retrieved a small dark red folder. No labels, no tabs. He set it in front of me like it weighed 10 pounds. Once you open this, he said, you can't unknow what's inside. Are you sure? No, I said honestly. But I need to know anyway. I opened it. Inside were two things, a sealed envelope and a printed document with a familiar heading, DNA results. My breath hitched. Hands shaking slightly, I read the report. The names jumped off the page. Subject A, Benjamin Carson. Subject B, Elena Waverly. Relationship, biological mother, son. Probability, 99.9%. I blinked hard, as if maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something else. They didn't. Next, the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten note on thick, cream-colored stationery. My father's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. Tight, clean, overly precise. Just like him. Ben, you were never mine. I knew from the beginning. But I chose to stay. I'm sorry I never told you. There never seemed to be a right time. Maybe there never is. Dad. That was it. No explanation, no elaboration, just those few lines that detonated my entire identity. I sat back in the chair, the paper trembling slightly in my grip. He'd known. My whole life he'd known. And he'd said nothing. Just carried the lie like a quiet stone in his pocket. Too heavy to throw away. Too small to share. I looked up at Mr. Dempsey. Did he ever talk to you about this? Only once, he said. He asked me to prepare this file a few years ago. He said it might never be needed. He hoped it wouldn't. I swallowed hard. And the inheritance? The real one? Mr. Dempsey nodded and pulled out a separate envelope from the same file. This came from Ms. Waverly's attorneys directly. She's still alive, and apparently waiting. He slid the envelope across the desk. I opened it. A formal letter, typed in cold. To Benjamin Carson, this letter serves as confirmation that you are the biological heir to the Waverly estate, as per the revised directive signed July 14, 20XX. Upon verified acceptance of your identity and your agreement to the accompanying clause, you will receive ownership of all assets, properties and holdings currently under the Waverly name. The clause is as follows. The heir must sever all legal, personal and financial ties with the Carson family. This includes, but is not limited to, Margaret Carson and all descendants and affiliates. No exceptions. I let the paper fall to the table. Sever all ties, I echoed. Like I'm a corrupted file. Mr. Dempsey was quiet. She wants to erase them, I said, and replace them with herself. It appears that way, he admitted. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, like the floor had subtly shifted beneath me. Is this even legal? I asked. Unfortunately, yes. A private inheritance is subject to the terms set by the benefactor. You have the right to refuse. I stared at the letter again. Elena Waverly was offering me millions. Power, legacy, but only if I became hers, and hers alone. I looked out the window. The sunlight on the street was too bright. The world was still turning, even though mine had just tilted. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. I need time, I said. Mr. Dempsey nodded. Of course. I walked out of his office into the blinding morning, the folder tucked under my arm like a ticking bomb. Truth, I realized, isn't always a gift. Sometimes, it's the one thing you never wanted to inherit. The kitchen felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the silence, or the way the yellow overhead light made everything look slightly faded, like a memory you couldn't quite touch. Margaret stood by the sink, rinsing out a mug like it was the most important task in the world. I sat at the kitchen table, the DNA test and letter still heavy in my backpack by the door. I cleared my throat. We need to talk. She didn't look at me. About what? You know what? She sighed, a deep, tired thing. and turned off the tap. I figured you'd come home with questions. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. You knew. All this time. You knew he wasn't my real father. Margaret dried her hands with a dish towel, and finally turned to face me. Yes. It hit me harder than I expected. Even though I'd suspected. Even though the evidence was right there. Something about hearing her say it out loud cracked something open. You lied to me. We protected you, she said. There's a difference. My laugh was bitter. Right. Nothing says protection like rewriting a person's entire life. She walked over slowly, pulled out the chair across from me, and sat. Her posture was stiff, her voice steady. You were a baby. You needed stability. Not a scandal. A scandal? I asked. Is that what I was? She didn't flinch. Your mother, Elena, was 19. Brilliant, ambitious, and reckless. She got involved with a married man. A powerful one. You were the result. She was already being courted by medical schools and investors. A child didn't fit the image. She gave me up, I said flatly. She signed away her rights, Margaret confirmed. Your biological father didn't want to keep you either. He paid to make the problem go away. I stared at her. Paid who? There was a pause. And then, softer. Us. I blinked. What? She came to me, Margaret said. I was working with her at the time. We weren't friends, but we had an understanding. She knew I couldn't have children. She knew your father had just lost his first wife. We were a clean solution. I felt like the floor had dropped from under me. So I was a deal. A quiet transaction. No, she said, reaching for my hand. Ben, no, you were a blessing. I may not have carried you, but I raised you. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night. I was there. You were mine. But you lied. I had to, she said, her voice breaking for the first time, because she didn't want you. And I couldn't let you grow up knowing that. I pulled my hand away. You could have told me the truth. She looked at me with teary eyes. Would it have made anything better? I don't know, I said honestly. But I would have had the choice. We sat there for a long moment. Her breathing was uneven. My chest felt tight. I stood. She wants me now. Elena. She wants to give me everything. If I cut you out. Margaret went pale. Of course she does. That's what she does. She doesn't give unless it benefits her. That's not love, Ben. That's control. I don't know what love looks like anymore, I said quietly. But I know what lies feel like. I walked to the door, grabbed my bag. Where are you going? She asked, voice shaking. To find her. Don't let her rewrite your story, she pleaded. I turned. Maybe it was never mine to begin with. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I sat in my car for a few minutes before pulling out my phone. I opened a travel app, typed in Seattle to Los Angeles, selected the earliest flight available. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. Closure? Truth? A woman with the same cheekbones as mine, offering a different version of my beginning? All I knew was this. If blood really cost this much, I needed to know why it was ever spilled at all. The car pulled through an iron gate taller than most buildings I'd lived in. A winding driveway curved through manicured hedges and eucalyptus trees, leading up to a white stone mansion with columned arches, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view that probably stretched all the way to the Pacific. I didn't know what I expected when I stepped out. Maybe a butler, a dog with a diamond collar, paparazzi hiding in the shrubs. But the front door opened before I could knock, and there she was. Elena Waverly. She was taller than I remembered from the photo, though that might have been the heels. Her gray blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek twist. Her face was carved from marble, beautiful, but cold. No smile, no hug, no maternal warmth, just a once-over and a nod. Mr. Carson, she said, crisp and businesslike. Right on time. You can call me Ben, I replied. Since you're, my mother. Her lips twitched slightly. Not quite a smile. More like amusement, or restraint. She stepped aside and gestured me in. The interior was just as icy as the exterior, all polished stone, glass, steel accents. The kind of house that echoed, that never held memories. She led me into what must have been a sitting room, though it felt more like an executive lounge. There was a tray of tea already set out. No cookies, no comfort. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, pouring a cup for herself. "Not me. I wasn't sure either," I admitted, taking a seat across from her. "But you left your name in a will. I think you knew I would." She took a slow sip. "It was a calculated risk." "You mean like having a baby at 19 and giving him away?" Her eyes didn't flinch. "Yes. Exactly like that." The air between us tightened. "You're not going to pretend?" I asked. "No tears? No apologies?" "I don't deal in sentiment," she said. "I deal in facts. And the fact is, you were a mistake I decided not to undo. It was the most efficient option at the time." I let out a dry laugh. "Wow. Hallmark should hire you." She set her cup down, perfectly aligned with the saucer. "You came here for answers. I can give you those. But don't expect them to come wrapped in regret." "Then why reach out at all?" I asked. "Why now?" She leaned back, legs crossed at the ankle like she was in a boardroom meeting. "Because I need a successor. Someone with the right name, the right bloodline. And no conflicting loyalties." I frowned. "You mean, no family?" She didn't answer directly. "The Waverly estate includes assets in healthcare, biotech and real estate. I built them from nothing. But this world, the corporate world, it requires legacy. Investors want continuity. A face, a name. So I'm a brand extension." "You're a solution," she said. "You've done well for yourself. Educated, stable, not an embarrassment." "That's more than I can say for most heirs." I shook my head, stunned by her detachment. "You abandoned me. You don't get to grade me now." "I do if I'm offering you everything," she replied. "My company, my properties, my wealth. It could all be yours, effective immediately." I stared at her. "There's a condition," I said flatly. "Of course," she said, as if it were obvious. "You'll need to sever all legal and personal ties with the Carson family. No contact, no shared resources. Total separation." "Margaret raised me. She was paid to do so," Elena replied without blinking. "Well, compensated. That doesn't mean she didn't love me." "Love," she repeated like it was a word in a foreign language. "Let me tell you something, Ben. Love makes people weak, it clouds judgment. Margaret's weakness was attachment. Mine was ambition. At least I'm honest about it." I stood up. "You're not offering me a legacy. You're offering me a transaction." She tilted her head. "Is that such a bad thing?" "Yes," I said. "Because I'm not a line item on your balance sheet." I turned toward the door. "Elena," I said, hand on the knob, "do you even wonder what I might have been, if you'd kept me?" For the first time, her expression flickered. Just for a second. Then it was gone. "I don't believe in what-ifs," she said. "Only outcomes." "Then here's one for you," I said. "I'm walking away." And I did. Out the door, down the marble steps, into the sharp LA sunlight that somehow felt warmer than anything in her house. She wanted to buy me with everything she had. But I'd already paid the price once. With 30 years of silence. And I wasn't about to sign another contract with a ghost in silk. The hotel room smelled like over-bleached linens and something faintly citrus, like an attempt at comfort that didn't quite land. The lighting was soft, low, golden, designed to make even loneliness look cinematic. I stood in front of the mirror above the minibar, watching my reflection like it was someone else. Same face I'd always known. But now it looked borrowed. Inherited. Like every feature had been assigned without consent. I turned my head, studying the shape of my jaw. Her jaw. Elena's. There was a kind of cruel irony in it. The mother who gave me nothing, gave me the face I wore every day. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the quiet settle in. The hum of the fridge. The faraway hum of traffic. The hum inside my head. Who am I? It felt like the question had been hovering just under the surface for years, like background static I'd gotten used to. But now, it screamed. and I had no good answer. I thought about Margaret, about her worn-out hands tying my shoelaces in kindergarten, the way she used to press her palm to my forehead when I said I didn't feel good. I thought about the time I failed my math midterm and she baked me brownies anyway, saying, "One bad grade doesn't define your brain, Ben. Or your heart." And I thought about the way she looked at me yesterday. Equal parts guilt and fierce protectiveness. A woman who lied, yes, but also stayed. Then there was Elena, who didn't even flinch when she said I was a mistake, who wore elegance like armor, and offered me the world as long as I amputated my past. Both women had given me something, both had taken something away, and maybe neither of them ever truly saw me, not really. One had shaped me out of necessity, the other had erased me out of convenience. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands hanging. The problem wasn't choosing between them. The problem was realizing that neither version of my life, the Carson son or the Waverly heir, had anything to do with who I actually was. Because I'd always felt it, hadn't I? Even as a kid, I had questions I didn't know how to ask, a sense of being slightly out of orbit, like I was acting out someone else's story, and the lines never quite fit. Not unwanted, but unclaimed. And now, standing at the intersection of blood and love, of truth and legacy, I had to ask the question no one had ever asked me before. Who am I when no one is watching? I got up and walked back to the mirror. The reflection didn't answer. It never does. But for the first time, I looked at that face, my face, and didn't search for resemblance. I wasn't trying to find Elena in the cheekbones or Margaret in the eyes. I wasn't trying to be someone else's story. I was just looking at me, not a product, not a secret, not a mistake, just me. And that had to be enough. For now, the office looked more like a luxury showroom than a place where people signed their souls away. Floor to ceiling windows overlooked Los Angeles, the skyline smeared with morning haze. Everything smelled like leather and filtered air. Elena was already there when I arrived, seated at the head of a long obsidian conference table, wearing a tailored cream suit and no expression. Next to her sat a man in a charcoal suit with slicked back hair and the cold confidence of someone who billed by the hour and didn't blink at fine print. "Mr. Carson," he said, standing as I entered. "I'm William Hart, legal counsel for Ms. Waverly." I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I took the chair at the opposite end of the table and set down the folder I had brought and I suspected would ruin the show. "I assume you're here to finalize the paperwork," Hart said, sliding a set of documents toward me. "We've prepared the full transfer, including assets, equity, and estate holdings, as outlined in the letter you received, all contingent upon the signed agreement of family severance." "And if I don't sign?" I asked, just to hear it said aloud. "You forfeit the inheritance in full," Elena replied, calm as glass. No threat, no emotion, just the terms of a contract. I opened the folder, pretending to review it. Pages of legalese, clauses about identity, privacy, corporate responsibility. The final page was highlighted, acknowledgement of voluntary disassociation, essentially a legal death certificate for my life with the Carsons. But I didn't come here to read. I came here to speak. "I had my own lawyer look into some things," I said, keeping my tone light. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. Hart didn't react. "Specifically the terms of my adoption," I continued. "Back then records were sealed unless challenged. But money talks. Turns out quite a lot of it changed hands in 1992. Neither of them blinked. $250,000, I said. Paid from an anonymous donor to Margaret and my father under the table. Months after I was Elena, I added. "Was that you?" Then she said simply, "Yes," like it was nothing, like she'd paid for a car. "You bought your way out of being a mother," I said. "And you bought your way back into my life." "In the adult world," she said coolly, "everything is a transaction. Relationships, careers, children. You don't have to like the system to survive in it." I let out a slow breath. "Maybe that's the difference between us. You survive systems. I still believe people can matter." Elena's gaze didn't waver. "You're letting sentiment cloud a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "No," I said. I'm letting clarity cut through 30 years of silence. I pushed the contract back across the table without touching it. Hart looked to Elena, unsure. She gave a small, sharp nod. You realize what you're turning down? She asked. I do, I said. I'm turning down your conditions, not your money. I pulled out the second folder I brought. Inside was a document of my own. A new clause, I said. Drawn up by my lawyer this morning. I slid it toward her. She unfolded it slowly. Hart leaned in. It read, I, Benjamin Carson, formally decline the inheritance of Elena Waverly, and any associated assets, holdings, or responsibilities. I relinquish any legal or financial claim to the Waverly name, estate, or future enterprises. I smiled faintly. I wanted the record to reflect that the choice was mine. Elena's jaw tensed. Just slightly. You think walking away makes you noble? She said. No, I said. I think it makes me free. She stood, brushing non-existent dust from her sleeves. People like you always come back. Sooner or later, money becomes louder than principles. Maybe, I said, standing too. But today, the quiet feels better. I walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back. You said everything's a transaction. But not everyone's for sale, Elena. And I left. Out into the sun-soaked hallway, my pulse steady for the first time in days. For once, I wasn't being handed a script. I wasn't playing a part in someone else's story. I was writing my own. The Waverly estate was bathed in twilight gold. Spotlights lit the lawn, casting long shadows over marble statues and trimmed hedges. A crowd had gathered. Journalists, shareholders, curious onlookers who had smelled drama in the air and came running. At the center stood a makeshift podium, sleek and black, with the Waverly family crest etched across the front. I stood behind it, a microphone clipped to my collar, the city of Los Angeles glowing faintly behind me. I took a breath. Cameras clicked. A drone buzzed overhead. I could feel her watching me from the terrace. Elena. Cold, composed, unreadable as ever. Standing in the shadows, like a queen awaiting her heir's coronation. Except I wasn't here to be crowned. I cleared my throat. My name is Benjamin Carson, I began. And I was offered the Waverly legacy. A fortune, a company, a name. Pause. And I'm here tonight to say, I'm turning it down. Gasps. A ripple through the crowd. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks. I continued. Power isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a leash. A way to control you, define you, erase the parts of you that don't fit the narrative. I looked directly at Elena, and for the first time, I saw her flinch. This past week, I said, I found out that the woman who gave birth to me also gave me away. And now, decades later, she wants to give me something else, everything apparently, with one condition, that I erase the people who raised me, that I pretend they never mattered. I shook my head. I won't do that. I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my pocket, and held it up. This is the contract I was asked to sign. It would have made me the legal heir to the Waverly Empire. And tonight, I want to show you exactly what I think of it. I struck a match. The flame caught fast. I dropped the paper into the fire pit beside the podium. The crowd watched it burn in silence, the edges curling, the name Waverly turning to ash. And instead, I said, I'm choosing something else. I reached into my jacket and held up a different folder. A new organization, privately funded by me. A foundation to support children who've been abandoned, displaced, or treated like property. It will be called the Choice Fund. Because every child deserves the right to be chosen, and to choose. A murmur of approval. Applause even. I didn't look at Elena again. She turned and walked back inside, heels clicking against the stone, swallowed by her own palace. It didn't matter anymore. I'd stopped needing anything from her, the moment I stopped needing to be hers. After the crowd thinned and the cameras left, I stayed behind. The fire pit still glowed faintly, smoke rising into the stars. I sat on the low stone wall near the garden. The city lights blinked in the distance. Somewhere below, life was happening, loud and messy and real. Footsteps approached behind me. I didn't have to turn to know it was her. Margaret. She sat beside me without a word, hands folded neatly in her lap. "I watched the whole thing from the live stream," she said quietly. "It took guts." I shrugged. "I wasn't brave, just tired." She nodded slowly. "You know, the first time I held you, you wouldn't stop crying. Your father couldn't soothe you. Neither could I. But then I started humming this stupid song from a cereal commercial, and for some reason you stopped." I smiled. "Guess I had taste even back then." She laughed, soft and low. "I didn't give birth to you, Ben. But you were mine the moment you stopped crying in my arms." I felt something tighten in my throat. "I lied to you," she said. "And for that, I'll always be sorry. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a second." I turned to her. "You don't have to apologize again. You stayed. That counts for more than anything." She rested her hand on mine. "You've always been my son," she whispered. Even when I didn't know how to say it. A few minutes passed in silence. Then I stood, pulled a second envelope from my pocket. The one from my father. The short, dry letter that had cracked my world open. I walked to the small koi pond at the edge of the garden, struck another match, watched the paper curl and burn. When the flame reached the last word, I dropped it into the water. It hissed, flared, then vanished. Smoke drifted upward, disappearing into the night. I didn't need a name anymore. Didn't need a title, or a legacy, or permission to exist. I finally belonged to myself.